Well, for Anthony Richardson out there in Indianapolis, there have been some warnings of this. We had talked about this last year with Joe Flacco, is that he is the most Mr. Steal Your Job backup quarterback to ever existed. Ever since he's been forced to be a backup by Lamar Jackson, by the way, it seemed like Joe Flacco be on a tear. Now, I'm not going to say that Joe Flacco does this intentionally, but he seems to do his best backup work behind Anthony Richardson, behind Deshaun Watson. Like, there might be a disturbing trend here with Joe Flacco because he ain't do none of this shit when he was backing up Zach Wilson. Like, where was this energy, Mr. Joe? Like, right when it's time to make Deshaun look awful, oh yeah, that's when Joe Flacco get up out there throw for 800 yards. Like,
man.
Mr. Steal Your Job is found another. Who was he backing up in Denver? No, he was a starter in Denver, and then he got benched, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Steal Your Job back at it with a vengeance. Okay, he took Anthony Richardson's job. Let's hear Bomani Jones's take on this one about what he sees in Anthony Richardson.
And an interception. That is 17 and a half yards of completion. It is only trick or treat with him, except trick is in capital letters and treat is in lowercase. He had an interception, 2 fumbles, lost 1, all bad. And then there was a point in the game where he came out and he did this thing right here where he tapped on his helmet, and that is the signal in football that you need to come out of the game for whatever reason. And then after the game, he came to the podium and he was asked why it was that he had to come out of the game.
I'm tired, I ain't gonna lie. That was a lot of running right there, what I did, and I don't think I was gonna be able to go that next play, so I just...
Hey.
You can't say that, brother.
You
can't say that, brother.
Do that one. That is... Don't know where you learned that. Like, where did you learn that? Like, why would you think tap? Have you ever seen a quarterback?
No.
You've never seen him. That's crazy. Why would you think? Lie. Like, the crazy thing was that he said that, and every NFL player was like, "Hey, you gotta lie."
Like, getting tired happens. Getting tired happens. We understand that, but you can't say that. You cannot
call a run play, right? Like, you two team oriented, because why in the world would you be like, yeah, let somebody in to play quarterback so they can throw the ball? That's kind of crazy. Like, that is absolutely kind of crazy there, right? Like, let's continue on with the clip here. Let's continue on with it.
This whole saying, I just needed a break right there.
Hey, say, little homie, I'm going to teach you a sentence that maybe you've never thought about using before. They haven't taught y'all that. I thought they would have taught you by now. You in football, you can break this out whenever you want. Really, in other sports, too. We let you do this in these other places, right? And the sentence that you needed to offer in that moment was keeping that in-house. You feel me? Keeping that in-house. That was what he needed to say, is that we were keeping that in-house, because you can't say that out loud, brother. I ain't seen a single football player who had any tolerance for this, right? The offensive line and the quarterback all play all the plays. Everybody else get to tap their head and say they need to come out of the game because they tired. And by the way, I would like to say that should give you a different level of respect for your offensive line, homies, right? Nobody else gets to do that, but they big asses got to be out there all the time, no matter what. Like, I remember Lincoln Kennedy.
This is a unrelated part of the conversation, but I did want to bring it up. Hey, man, we don't talk about how we just be asking these big-ass offensive linemen to be pulling every play. Like, when people like, run the ball. Why are they running the ball? I'm like, because they fucking tired. Like...
You gotta think about it, bro. These 320, 330-pound men moving every play. Moving.
And then, like, sometimes it's just like a simple gap scheme, right? Where you're just moving up a gap or two. But that's not when the Browns was doing wide zone, like, all the time. And people are like, we need to run the ball 40 times. I'm like, Joe Batonio would be fucking dead. Okay. Like, because we sometimes ask, like, Jack Conklin to pull from tackle to go all the way to the opposite side and lead block. Do that 5 times and see if you still out here trying to block.
You know how hard that is when you 320 pounds, 330 pounds?
Oh, and by the way, your breaks are when you pass block. And that's not like not energy consuming at all. Like, that's very energy consuming. You want to know why the Browns offensive line looked so much better in both areas last week? It's because Jameis Winston was getting rid of that ball quickly. So your pass sets went from oh my fucking God, throw the ball to oh, ball out. We good. Let's go. First down, baby. Like, you saw offensive linemen running to the ball after Jameis was out there. Deshaun out there, he'd used up all the energy because he holding on to that damn ball so long. And then you wondering why we can't run. We got no energy to pull these guards. So all we can do is like draw or just a simple run up the middle. You ain't gonna get shit with that. Run game a bit more complicated than people think, man, and fatigue matters. Okay. Like, brothers be tired. One day we need to get Kyron on the show to talk about this. Like, now, another thing I would like to bring up in relation to this Anthony Richardson thing is that this could have been a offensive line led coup because everything we said about Jameis is much more true about Joe Flacco. Like, getting rid of that ball quickly. Oh yeah, Joe's whole career is getting rid of that damn ball before he takes a sack, right? So they might have been like, yeah, man, he tired. Like, he tired. Bro, we out here having a block for 8 seconds for him, and then he got the nerve to be tired. Nah, that one did not land right. In the locker room equivalent to the swing states, right? Like, that one didn't land right in the Midwest, okay?
A locker room equivalent to the swing states.
Hey, look, Anthony Richardson can have the wide receivers locked up. Some quarterbacks have the wide receivers locked up. But you lose that offensive line, boy, you in trouble. Okay? You in trouble. Like, there's nowhere else to pick those up. Because, wait, the offensive line go with tight ends. Tight ends go with the fullbacks. And then, like, the running backs don't even get that much of a vote. It's like, oh, man, you in trouble, dog. You got to win. You got to win the offensive line. And let me tell you where that comment didn't go over well. Like,
he what? He said he was what?
Like, the wide receivers is probably like, whatever. Like, it don't matter that much. But if you play guard, you're like, what? Like,
no, you know what the wide receivers was upset about? You know what the wide receivers was upset about? 10 or 32. That's what they was upset.
Yeah, look, he ain't really running no wide receivers either. Like,
that's like, yeah, man, y'all can bet you. No, I can bet you.
Yeah. Look, he lost it like that. I mean, that's how you lose the locker room right there. Wide receivers ain't with you. The O line ain't with you. Oh well, it's inevitable.
Gotta sit you down, son. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Hey man, look, they did the same shit to Bryce Young, right? Now they try to slide Bryce Young out there. They gonna slide him back out. Like,
as soon as they don't get healthy, right back to that bitch.
Oh yeah, but that's unfortunate for Anthony Richardson. Now, you did want to have a conversation about Anthony Richardson as a prospect going forward. What is your feelings about that?
So, I was pondering. I feel like his time in Indianapolis is probably over, right? Because once you bench your quarterback, it's hard to go back. It's hard to go back to him again after that.
Now, New York did do something similar with Zach Wilson, where they benched him, they brought him back, and he did start again, albeit that's because Aaron Rodgers was traded for, right, and got injured.
That's it. Only reason.
it might be something where they feel like they can go and get a bridge like that. Like maybe they think they're going to go after Kirk Cousins or something like that and sit them for a year and see what they got. But yeah, I mean, this is basically, this is on its way to happening. I just don't think the Colts have accepted it yet.
Yeah, it's over. Like, it's over. Once you draft a guy, and remember we had our conversations about who we would take number one overall, like which quarterback we would take between C.J. Bryson and Anthony Richardson. And you said, I'm taking Anthony Richardson, even though I know he's a project.
You got to commit to the project.
And you got to commit to the project. And it's going to take some time. But when you get towards the end, you might have the best quarterback in the draft. If you do it right. If you do it right, you might have the best quarterback in the draft. I said I'm taking CJ because I know CJ's good and I ain't trying to deal with the repercussions if he's not. You know what I'm saying? You can't draft Anthony Richardson. Let him play 10 games and then cut bait.
Yeah, it's kind of
like
crazy.
You can't do that. Like, that's not how that goes. That's not how that works. And since they already pulled the plug, my next thought was, okay, what team is going to trade for him? Because that's clearly where this is headed. Like, a team's going to be like, we can fix him.
And I can see where they could fall into the trap of like thinking, well, we gave him the year where he didn't have to play. And then because he got injured.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he came back this year and it's just not clicking. And I think I'm a little bit partial to like, okay, maybe he's not going to live up to his full potential, but there's like a chance that if you get him in the right system, right? I think there are debates about what that right system might be, but if you get him in the right system, you can get something out of him. But I think what Bomani says it in that clip, this looks like a dude who needs to be playing college football still at times. Like, and the issue is that he needs to play more football in order to get better. But the NFL is clearly far too good for him to be playing at right now. So you can't keep him out there because he's playing awful.
Mm-hmm.
But if you bench him, he's not going to develop. And I get the argument because I think Kai made this argument on Twitter that, like, you know, he got his money, so like success looks different for different people. But if you're just looking at this from a pure like get the most out of your career standpoint, I do think this is where you have to consider like playing in college, because right now the truth is with the NFL, you can't just like take a year in the UFL and people gonna look at you the same. You play in the UFL, they're gonna start looking at you like a practice squad guy, right? So in order to keep that a luster on you that you have from being a former first round pick, you got to go somewhere else and not play. And I think he needs to play. Like, he needs to play more football. Like, I wonder if this affects Jalen Milroe, because like if I look at Jalen Milroe, I'm like, I would love to see him in another year in Kalen DeBoer's system, right? Like, see what that looks like at the end of the day. Because like every year, Jalen Milroe has made strides and gotten better, but at some point he plateaus at some place that's higher than it was last year. Anthony Richardson ain't even get to that point. Like, you look at Anthony Richardson's best year in college, it's got nothing on what Milroe has done in college, right?
Nothing at all.
So
not even close.
Even if you're Indian, you're like, oh, I want to do those kind of things. You might be looking at Jalen Milroe like, well, maybe he could do those things better. The only difference is that Anthony Richardson got far stronger arm than Milroe does, but it don't matter if that arm ain't accurate.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because we talk about the Browns a lot and what the quarterback situation is going to be going forward, all that good stuff. I remember you saying that you wouldn't take a quarterback in the first round this year if you were the Browns.
I'm not there yet definitively, but like
that's where you're leaning
towards that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you lean. If they had the opportunity to trade for Anthony Richardson, would you do it if you were the Browns?
It depends on what the trade is, right?
To me, it's purely what level of draft capital are we talking here?
Yeah. if it's like a 6th round pick to bring in Anthony Richardson, now the only issue is he's an early round draft pick, so his cap hit's not nothing.
Yeah, it's going to
Right.
be somewhat significant.
So it's probably not something that's on the Browns' radar at all, to be honest, because they would have to bring in what's like a $20 million cap hit for him. They're not. The Browns ain't trying to pay more than like maybe $15 million for a year for a quarterback right now. And if they're going to do that, they'd rather just extend Jameis with money they can move down the line past the Watson contract than like a rookie deal that they can't maneuver at all. But so realistically, I don't think the Browns would be interested. But like if we're just playing like Madden, right? We're in a hypothetical world. Yeah, like a 6th round pick would be enough for me to take a flyer on him. I would have to be a team in the right system too, right? Like I'm gonna shoot my shot here because I shot it with Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, and I think that was correct. If I'm Anthony Richardson, I find a way to get teamed up with Greg Roman, right? Because that is the dude you could be successful with. Greg Roman, not the offensive coordinator you want around a quarterback who doesn't need training wheels, but if you have a quarterback who needs that, he's going to help you get to a sufficient base, right? Because this offensive system is so simple and it allows him to do what he does well, which is he's hard to tackle. I think a lot of people look at him and they think of Cam, and I think I've been guilty of this too. Cam, Josh Allen, because he's 6'5" and he's an incredible athlete. But if you look at how the ball comes out his hand, it doesn't look like Cam. It doesn't look like Josh Allen when the ball comes out his hand. It looks like Colin Kaepernick. It looks like Justin Fields, right? He throws those ropes. He doesn't really put touch on the ball. And those quarterbacks have been proven that they need an offensive system that's going to prop them up a little bit more than what Shane Steichen's system's going to do, where it's like it has some RPO stuff in there, but they're going to ask you to go downfield a lot. Like that's just not how Anthony Richardson needs to be attacking the field. And if he is going to throw downfield that much, he needs to run more often. So I think that's what he needs. Like, given that he can't go back to college, is he needs to kind of just low value deal, get traded to not Baltimore, but to the Chargers for a little while. And then Justin Herbert to miss a game or two. He get in there, look pretty good. And then it clicks with the team. Like, oh, okay. Like Matt LaFleur doesn't need a quarterback right now, but like he does really well with this kind of stuff, right? Kyle Shanahan would hate him. Like there's like a very specific type of coach that it would work with, but he's not in that situation with Steichen, right? Because Steichen, he's like quiet as kept. He's much more comfortable with these pocket passes. I know he had success with Jalen Hurts, but I mean, this isn't the first time he's looked more comfortable with the Gardner Minshew and now with Joe Flacco.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I wonder what teams are going to try to talk themselves into him, especially because the quarterback class coming up is not that great. Like it's 2 guys at this point.
I would imagine it's not going to be a team that needs a quarterback, right? I like because he's not a prospect you go for if you need a quarterback. I would imagine it's a team that absolutely does not need a quarterback that goes after him. Kind of similar like how the Cowboys traded for Trey Lance, even though that was dicey. Like, oh yeah, they could use it as leverage against Dak, but once Trey Lance threw like 5 interceptions in a quarter of a preseason game, that shit was over with. I think it would be like, I think the Chargers would make some sense there. I think Arizona would make some sense there. And I think maybe Minnesota, but I think he would be too needed in Minnesota. Right. Like, so, you know, like, cause they don't really got a quarterback, right? And they got JJ that they're going to try to make the dude after this year. What else? What other teams? I mean, Baltimore would make a ton of sense, right? Like, there's no better person to learn more from than Lamar, even though he's not the passer that Lamar was coming out of college. Which, like, why do we keep acting like that wasn't the case with Lamar Jackson?
I don't know, man.
We have like collective amnesia about what college football looked like in that era, because I swear the way people talk about Lamar Jackson is as if they never watched a game of him at Louisville. Like, I was like, yeah, he used to be flat-footed in the pocket, but he was still throwing that shit. Like,
Absolutely.
He's like, I've never seen somebody who's been a Heisman Trophy winner. And remember when Heisman Trophy winners and winning the MVP was like a rare thing? Shout out to Cam Newton for breaking that. But like the Heisman Trophy winner was like seen as a bust, right? Because getting a Heisman Trophy winner didn't necessarily translate to being a great quarterback. This dude won the Heisman and 2 MVPs, and people still talk about, can he play? But that's kind of the situation I think that he should look for, is a situation where he's not going to be the heir apparent. He's just going to be a backup there, right? And I think that'd be best for his development. If he goes somewhere to be the heir apparent, he ain't ready. He ain't ready to be the heir apparent. But with Anthony Richardson, we don't even know what that is because he hasn't been allowed to play enough football yet. Like, and where's he going to play this football?
Yeah, man, that's the thing. That's when I see people like talking about hypothetical trades to the Cleveland Browns and everything like that. I'm like, that's like, Ken Dorsey worked with Cam and he worked with Josh Allen, and like, look at Anthony Richardson. He's built like those guys. And I'm like, I get it. I understand it. It makes sense. Like, that train of thought makes sense to me. But I'm like, bro, I don't know.
This is why talking about quarterback on Twitter gets dangerous for me, because it becomes very apparent that when it comes to certain quarterbacks, we only have a couple templates to pick out from, and we just be lumping everybody into them templates. And I'll be like, that is woefully insufficient. Like, woefully insufficient. We just be taking like one aspect of a quarterback and be like, well, that means he's just like Cam. And look, I'm not saying I'm above making that mistake as well, right? Because I've made that mistake with Anthony Richardson where I'm like, oh, it's like Cam Newton and this and that. Should have looked at it further. I'm like, nah, man, he don't really throw the ball like Cam, right? Like, same thing with like Deshaun Watson. People were comparing him to Cam Newton. I'm like, well, he don't play like Cam. He kind of play like Joe Burrow or like Aaron Rodgers back in the day, right? Like, where he holds the ball forever. And it's more about adjusting. We don't do a great job of looking at quarterback stylistically, is my point. We just be looking at that sheet, okay?
Or you just
like,
look at you look at how they're built physically, and you're like, oh yeah, this is just like the dude. He's built exactly like it. Like,